Kia ora koutou and welcome to Frogs on Friday. I'm Shannon Barlow, MD for Frog Recruitment in New Zealand. And today I am thrilled to be joined by our wonderful shared services, that's a mouthful, shared services manager, Vikki Walton, to celebrate International Women's Day this week and to talk about her experiences specifically within recruitment. And of course, we'll have our usual sections, Mahi Media, Hot Jobs, and our social media poll. So let's crack straight into it. So last week I spoke with reporter Jean Bell from Newsroom and it was all about the effects of Omicron on workplaces and I guess how that extra added challenge from Omicron, how that's affected everyone. And not surprisingly, we've seen that businesses and staff are under an enormous amount of pressure. In a recent survey that we have run, we found that actually COVID burnout is worsening. Only 15% of New Zealanders who we surveyed affirmed that their mental health had improved since the same time last year, so March 2021. With a whopping 65% saying that they were feeling more burnout, which is pretty significant considering it had already increased post-pandemic. And I guess sort of looking at why that may be, so there's some obvious reasons there. People are taking less leave. So although a lot of people took the opportunity to take a decent break over the summer period, it feels like even though the sun's still shining, it feels like that holiday period was a long time ago already. And with that working extra hours and also just the general stress of dealing with the pandemic, getting used to new settings, and facing the ever-changing curveballs that living in these times serve up to you, I guess. I think one of the things there with the longer hours, so of course you'll be aware that we have a massive talent shortage at the moment. And one of the effects of that means that potentially there's more work for you to do with less staff. The same thing due to absences. So you might have staff off who are isolating due to COVID or being a household contact. So there's more for you to do with less resources. So it means that people are racking up some pretty long hours there, and there's only so long that you can bear that out. So I think those are some of the key reasons for increased burnout. I wanted to touch on one of those points, and particularly that pressure to cope with an increased workload. And what we're finding is that people aren't taking the time for their well-being, or I guess it's been slightly less of a priority as they just deal with what's in front of them. So over the past 12 months or so, particularly, we've seen some really great initiatives for well-being being introduced. So things like your lunchtime yoga, meditation, virtual catch-ups. There was one company I know of, I particularly liked their catch-up sessions called Wine and Wine. But lots of great things that have been brought into play and putting that focus on employees' well-being. But the problem is now with the extra workload, we're finding or hearing from candidates and employees, that with the extra workload, they feel like they can't afford to take that break from their desk or from what they're doing and the demands of work. So it's going to be another tricky one for this year to be able to balance out being able to keep driving business forward and keep your career on track, but keeping that balance to make sure that you can last the long haul and that you're looking after yourself. So a question for you watching at home is, what can you do to prioritize your well-being, or what maybe there's some measures that you've put in place to make sure that you're achieving that balance. Something to think about. Okay, so let's roll on to our job section, see what's been some of our hot jobs today. Okay, so first up we have a personal assistant role. This one's based in Auckland and offering a competitive salary. And speaking of that work-life balance, this one's an opportunity where you can work reduced hours for 25 to 30 hours per week. It's a permanent role. If we go to the next one, there we go. Another Auckland base, so this is a permanent role as well, relationship manager and team leader, supporting stakeholders across land access teams with their working relationships. So it sounds like a really interesting one, working with local councils, government bodies and iwi groups. So if you have that experience, be sure to get in touch with Kirsty. And lastly, one from Wellington, so a senior advisor for policy and negotiations. So this one, they're looking for a background in law and natural resources or general planning and policy. Okay. So there's the contact details there if you want to get in touch with the team. Of course, this is just a small sample of the many jobs that we have on offer, both the permanent and temporary and fixed term contracts across Auckland and Wellington. All right, so if we go on to now, so as you'll be aware, it was International Women's Day earlier this week. And within Frog Recruitment and the People to People group, we decided to celebrate this internally and to hear from some of the stories of our own wonderful women within the business. So I believe there's a short clip here to give you a taste of some of their experiences.
My name is Liz Punchin. I'm a Director and Acting Branch Manager for People to People Melbourne.
My name is Peter and I'm the Director of People to People in South Australia.
I'm Lisa Johnson. I'm the Shared Services Manager with People to People, and I've worked with People to People for 15 years.
Frustratingly, we do still see bias in some recruitment processes, certainly not all. I feel like businesses have come a long way in this area. There's still a way to go though. So not only with gender, but also age, ethnicity, disability, other cultural backgrounds. So it is something that we do need to be aware of as recruiters.
I personally don't feel that I encounter bias in my workplace. However, as a recruiter, I see a lot of unconscious bias against women. One that I often think about is the ability to offer positions on a part-time basis. Whilst over the past 2 years, we have seen flexibility increase across many businesses, part-time work has not increased. And I speak to many women who are struggling to find work that can support the family and work balance.
Well, I'm incredibly lucky because I don't think that I experience any bias. I have in my past, not with People to People, but with other employers, but now I don't feel that I do. However, I'm very much aware that I'm not the norm and that I'm very lucky. because most women will be experiencing bias and discrimination in the workforce right now.
I feel fortunate to be surrounded by very impressive women, not only in my professional but personal life as well. But one that does stand out is our Managing Director, Erin Devlin. She runs this business, she is a mother, an author, an advocate for our industry through the RCSA, and she does it all effortlessly. So Erin is very impressive and inspiring.
I feel very privileged to have many women in my life that inspire me daily, and today I'd like to talk about my grandmother. She's 89 years old this year, and she's built a strong career as a dressmaker whilst raising 3 children and running a farm alongside my grandfather. Today she still makes clothes, knits beanies and blankets and donates them to charity. I couldn't have a better role model to look up to.
In terms of a woman that I really admire and look up to, I actually really admire young women. Women of my generation, being Generation X, we entered the workforce at a time where it was just accepted, right? So it was acceptable for there to be rude jokes, for people to touch you. It was just accepted that you would be paid less. And the young women of today have said enough is enough. And it's not just young women, I know that, but I just really admire the courage and bravery.
Conversation. I truly believe the only way we can keep fighting the bias is to continue the conversation.
One thing that would make a difference in fighting bias is to acknowledge and communicate when you do recognise that there is bias in whether it be recruitment processes or anything else within your professional and personal life. Do acknowledge and communicate when you can see that there is bias and be part of that change.
Hey, that's great. I just love hearing those stories and real experiences from people within the business. Wonderful, strong women. Speaking of strong women, we have Vikki Walton here today.
Thanks.
Now, Vikki, what's one bias that you think that you still see towards women in recruitment? I know we've come a long way, but there's still a way to go. So what's one that's something to work on?
Thanks, Shannon. I guess recruitment, even though it tends to still be one of the more female-dominated industries, it's no different to other industries where women might not be taken seriously in the so-called professional services space, by some of our clients at least. There's still a perception/bias that women might be better suited to business support and customer service portfolios. Some clients in the legal, financial or operations and supply chain space might still prefer to work with a male recruiter, or, at least take them more seriously when recruiting, their more senior roles perhaps. Definitely more in that senior space, I'd say.
Absolutely. Well, and as you say, it's something, unfortunately, we do still see, but as we can work our way towards that, and sometimes just being aware of that and being able to challenge some of that bias is a big part, goes a long way towards reducing that. And on that theme, what's one thing that you think would really make a difference in fighting that bias in the workplace?
Look, again, I think it comes down to perception. I think women need to back themselves more. It often goes against our nature to put ourselves out there. I believe imposter syndrome is very real in both sexes. But I think a man might not necessarily have that same negative internal dialogue as a woman, which, is ironically created by that same bias that, stops women moving forward. Sometimes you only need to compare CVs to see, that a man and with the same qualifications and experience might sell himself better and maybe emphasize his past successes more than perhaps a woman might. That's generalizing, but I think women to their detriment sometimes can be more humble by nature, or understand when it comes to celebrating, when it comes to celebrating their successes. Often I remember being, not that I was a show off, but sometimes being told not to be a show off by my mother. And I think possibly women are just doers, getting on with doing it rather than talking about it. But I do also think that employers need to focus on diversity in the workplace. We know from experience that diversity at work and in this beautiful country makes it a better place for us all to thrive. Ignorance is not bliss, it's just ignorance, and there's no excuse for it anymore.
Absolutely, some good points there. And I think it's important that we're able to raise people up and give them the confidence, females and males, to be able to celebrate their own successes and to not be, it is a very Kiwi thing, isn't it, not to want to give yourself a pat on the back or to feel like you're making a big deal out of yourself, but it's something that we need to be able to do, or to at least start changing that internal dialogue a lot. So I like that point.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Vikki. Okay, let's go to our Twitter poll or social media poll from last week. Okay, so with the rule of New Zealand residents and citizens needing to complete an isolation period being lifted recently, will you resume travelling internationally for business? Now, for me, this was an absolutely yes. It's been way too long. I've had many cancelled trips, so trying to get there straight away. But overwhelmingly, the majority went for, no, I'm going to wait a bit. So again, that might be effect of just uncertainty with Omicron, or wanting to get through the wave here first. Or it might be a little bit of, I'm not going to get too excited about this just yet, because like me, you may have booked several trips that didn't eventuate. So wait till see that it actually happens and go ahead. But interesting to see the caution there in international travel. Okay, and what do we have for this week? Okay, so we looked at whether or not you have participated more in workplace wellbeing initiatives now compared with pre-pandemics. So yes, I'm involved more. No, it hasn't really been a focus, or I was doing the yoga sessions, but now I'm just too busy. So again, can't wait to see what the results are on this one. Hopefully it's still being a focus and the yeses get a few votes, but we shall see. Excellent. Well, that is it for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you all again next week. Kia ora.